Have you ever felt trapped in something that no one else can see? As if there was an invisible chain tied to your soul, something that prevents you from living, from smiling, from feeling peace. I lived like this for 19 years old, lost, empty, enslaved by sin. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized who I was. I walked away from everything, my family, my faith, and God. I thought that there was no turning back, that what I had done was unforgivable. But let me ask you something. Do you believe that God still talks to people? That He enters someone's room in the middle of the night and changes everything? Because that's what happened to me. And me, I was not praying or seeking, I was at rock bottom. But it was there, in the deepest darkness, which to divine light found me. It was real. It was supernatural. Maybe you're watching this right now and thinking, does God still care about me? And the answer is yes. God still transforms lives. He still breaks chains. He still visits wounded hearts in the silence of the early morning. And if you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. What I'm going to tell you is not just a story, it's a spiritual warning. Living proof that God's love has no limits. About what His forgiveness reaches even the darkest places of the soul. So stay with me until the end. Because in the next few minutes, you will see how a simple touch from God was able to completely change my 19 years of pain, shame, and spiritual prison. And if you're feeling something inside, like this video is speaking directly to you, don't ignore it. This could be God calling you. It's not just a video, it's a meeting. And if there's anything I've learned on this journey of pain and liberation, it's that prayer has power. She was the one who supported me, even when I no longer believed in anything. He was the silent prayer of someone who loved me, even from a distance, which opened spiritual gaps for the miracle to happen. That's why, leave your prayer request here in the comments. Write with faith, even if it's just a few words. We will pray for you. I will read and I will present each name before God, because I know that He still frees, heals, and transforms. And if you've ever felt God touch you just in those first few minutes, comment "I believe" below. This simple act activates the faith within you and shows the world that you still believe in new beginnings. And look, don't leave without leaving a like on this video. This helps. This testimony reach other lives who, like me, thought it was already too late. And if you're not yet subscribed, subscribe to the channel now, because here we don't tell stories, we share miracles. Every week there are new videos, new testimonies, new chances for God to speak to you. So activate the bell and walk with us. Now take a deep breath, because what I'm going to tell you next is the darkest moment of my life. It was the day I thought it was the end, but that was where God started it all. I was a slave to sin, lies, betrayals, addictions, and the more I tried to get out, the deeper I sank. It was like being in a bottomless pit, where every attempt to climb up only made me slide down faster. I lived with a weight on my shoulders, an emptiness in my chest, and a guilt that consumed me from the inside. I slept badly. I woke up worse. I smiled on the outside, but inside I screamed in silence. I knew I was destroying my life. I knew I was hurting people who loved me. But still, I continued. I continued because it was easier to pretend nothing was happening than to face what I had become. And the scariest thing is that, over time, I started to get used to the pain. I got used to living far from God. I got used to seeing myself as someone who no longer deserved forgiveness. I looked up and thought, is there still salvation for someone like me? Because it wasn't just the sin itself. It was the feeling of being dead inside, having lost the sparkle in your eyes, the will to live, the purpose. Addiction promised me relief, but it only gave me more guilt. The lie promised me freedom, but it only left me more trapped. I saw myself surrounded by darkness, living a life without direction, far from my essence, my calling, the presence of God. And even though I heard about His love, I thought it was for others, not for me. I believed I had gone too far, that heaven was no longer open to someone with so much accumulated sin. And this is the enemy's cruelest trap, making us believe that God has abandoned us. But the truth is that He never left the place. During these 19 years, God saw me, heard me, even when I pretended He didn't exist. And you know when you feel that voice inside your chest that insists that it's not over yet? It was Him. Even in silence, He was there. I ignored it. I hardened my heart. But even so, he surrounded me with deliverances that I didn't even notice. I remember one night in particular where everything seemed lost. I no longer saw any point in continuing. It was as if the world had lost its color. Life had lost its value. I locked myself in the room, and the weight I felt was almost physical, a pain in the soul that cannot be explained. It was at this point that I realized something bigger was about to happen, because it was in that same darkness that a spark of light began to shine. It wasn't something explosive. It wasn't an immediately visible miracle, but it was something that touched my soul, a thought, a calling, a whisper. It was as if God was telling me, I'm still here. And it was at that moment that something inside me began to break. A pride, a resistance, a barrier that prevented me from surrendering. And for the first time in many years I cried. But it was a different cry, not out of sadness, but out of relief, as if my soul was screaming for help. And finally someone had listened. If you're watching this far, it's because in some way God is also calling you. And maybe what you need now is not explanations, but a reunion, a moment of truth, without masks, where you can say, I need help. And it's okay if you feel weak, because it is precisely in the weak that God shows his strength. So if this story is moving you, comment below I want to be free too, or simply write pray for me. You are not alone. I'm reading everything, and yes, we will pray together. God still restores. God still frees. And this here is just the beginning. Maybe you too are struggling with something. No one sees. Pretending everything is fine, but inside imploding. You've even gotten used to smiling while carrying the weight of a past that haunts you, of wrong choices, of words you said and can't take back. I know what it's like. I lived like this. The soul begging for help and the body pretending to be firm. You go to work, talk to people, post online, but when you lay your head on the pillow, the silence screams, the heart tightens, and the question always comes back, is there still hope for me? The truth is that many of our battles are not visible. The addiction that no one knows about, the toxic relationship you hide, the feeling of guilt for having turned away from God, the pain of having abandoned the person who loved you. Sometimes the fight is with thoughts, against the will to give up everything, against that voice that says you are worthless, that you will never change. I know that voice. She stalked me for years. He told me I was a lost cause, that sin had overcome me, that God didn't listen to me anymore. But let me tell you something that hell doesn't want you to hear. God still believes in you, even if you think it's too far, even if you destroyed things that seemed irretrievable. God still sees purpose in you. He still calls you by name. And do you know what made me resist for so long? The fear of being exposed, the fear of facing my own faults, the fear of finding out that maybe it was too late, but it wasn't. And it's not for you either. There are moments when everything seems to collapse around us, just to show us that we can no longer live without God, that we need Him, that we need healing, of spiritual liberation, of reconnection with the presence that we once felt, but that today seems so distant. And it is at this point that many lives are transformed, at rock bottom, when there are no more excuses, when there is no more strength, when all that remains is to raise your eyes and say, "Help me, Lord," and you don't even need fancy words. God understands your pain even in silence. When I arrived at that place, the place of total surrender, something began to change. I wasn't completely free yet. It still had chains, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope, and that was enough to take the first step. God does not demand perfection from those who return. He just wants sincerity. He just wants a heart willing to start over. I had moments when I thought, God will never take me back. I've gone too far. This phrase echoed inside me like a sentence. It was as if a wall had risen between me and heaven, and I believed that wall was my fault. It was the weight of my past, my choices, the times I said no to God, even though I knew He was the only way out. I saw myself as someone irrecoverable. I could no longer imagine standing before God with a clean heart. I felt like I had tarnished my story too much, hurt people too much, gotten my hands too dirty. Shame became my constant companion. And the more time passed, the more I believed this lie. Because yes, it was a lie. one of the cruelest things that the enemy plants in the hearts of those who move away from the presence of God, the lie that it is too late. That sin has already swallowed you completely, that there is no turning back. But God never gave up on me, and He doesn't give up on you. Even when we turn our backs, even when we sink into sin until we no longer see the light, He is still there, waiting, calling, loving it. But at the time, I didn't see that. I only saw the abyss. I saw my mistakes, my failures, and the silence inside me. The prayer no longer came. Faith seemed dead, and yet God began to reach me. It started subtly, with thoughts that didn't seem to come from me, with memories of childhood, when I felt His presence in such a pure way, with songs that appeared out of nowhere, with people who said things I needed to hear, small signs, little touches, but my heart was still hardened. I still resisted, as if I didn't want to accept that God's grace was really for me. I thought I was unworthy, but something inside me began to crack, a feeling of longing, missing God. I miss the peace that I once experienced. I miss who I was before I lost myself in sin. And this longing gnawed at me, because I remembered the promises. I remembered the prayers from when I was younger. I remembered the times I said I would never walk away from God. And looking at me in that state was like looking at a stranger. The shame was so much that I couldn't even imagine going back to a church, praying again, saying Father out loud again. But still, God did not remain silent. Through my darkest days, He was drawing me, allowing me to feel, little by little, that I was still a son, that no matter how far I had moved away, He never stopped recognizing me, and I began to realize that God's love does not depend on our performance, that He loves us even when we are broken, even when we are lying on the ground. And maybe you're feeling now what I felt back then, a lump in your throat, a weight in your chest, a desire to return, but not knowing how. I want to tell you that there is no greater sin than God's mercy. You can still start over. He still calls you. And if this message is reaching your heart, write it here in the comments, I'm still a son, or simply, take me back, God. Let's create a place of truth and restoration here, a space where God can act. Because when heaven decides to touch earth, nothing stays the same. It was early one morning, alone, in tears, that I heard something that changed my life. I'm still here. It wasn't an audible voice, like someone next to me. It was something deeper, something that crossed my chest like a truth that I could no longer ignore. It was as if God, after so long in silence, had whispered directly into my spirit, and that whisper was louder than any scream I had ever made in despair. I remember exactly the feeling. My eyes were red, my breathing was heavy, and the dark room seemed to squeeze my heart even tighter. But at that moment, a presence enveloped me. It was as if, for the first time in years, I had been seen, achieved, touched in the most hidden place in my soul. I didn't know if it was real, if it was my tired mind trying to comfort me, but a strange peace came over me, an inexplicable relief, as if that simple, I'm still here, had torn down an entire wall that I spent years building. God knew exactly what to say. He didn't come to accuse me. He didn't come to charge me. He didn't remind me of my sins. He just stated, I'm still here. And that alone was enough to make me fall apart once and for all. Because there I realized that it wasn't God who had turned His back. It was me. I hid. I was the one who walked away. I who, out of shame, guilt, and fear, chose to remain silent before Him. But He never stopped being close. And on that cold floor, between sobs and regret, I began to speak. It wasn't a pretty prayer. They were disconnected, crying, raw words. I asked for forgiveness. I said I was tired, that I no longer knew who I was, but that if He was still listening to me, I wanted to come back. And in that instant, something inside me began to change. It wasn't magic, it wasn't automatic, but it was true. It was as if a key had turned. The weight I was carrying started to get lighter. The chains that tied me to the past began to loosen, and I felt, with all the certainty that anyone can feel, that God still believed in me. That morning was the milestone of my new beginning. I still had a lot to overcome. There were still addictions, bad memories, open wounds, but now I was no longer alone. From then on, I started to walk differently, listening differently, feeling different. It was as if God had rekindled a flame within me that the world had tried to put out for almost 2 decades. And maybe that's what's happening to you right now. Maybe this video will be your morning. Maybe God is using this screen, this voice, this testimony to remind you He's still there, and you can still come back. The next day, something changed. The desire to sin disappeared. For the first time in years, I felt peace. And it wasn't an ordinary peace, the kind we feel after solving any problem. It was a peace that invaded the chest, that silenced thoughts, that even calmed breathing. It was as if heaven had approached me, as if an invisible but powerful presence had taken hold of my heart and said, "You are safe now." I remember waking up with my eyes still heavy from crying the night before, but there was lightness in the air, a lightness that I hadn't known in a long time. It was as if that voice I heard in the early hours of the morning had left a trail inside me, a trail of truth, of restoration, of hope. And the most impressive thing is that I didn't make any effort to feel it. I didn't wake up thinking about being more spiritual. I didn't make a list of promises. I just woke up differently. That weight that accompanied me for years, that compulsion that dragged me towards error, that anxiety that left me breathless, they had lost strength. They didn't disappear all at once, but they were weakened. Something inside me had been touched. And when God touches, nothing stays the same. The desire to sin, which before was almost uncontrollable, now gave way to a new desire. The desire to be close to Him, to truly know Him, to reconcile myself with my faith, to see myself freed, whole, restored. For the first time in a long time, I no longer felt disgusted with myself. I didn't hate myself. I no longer saw myself as a lost cause, and that didn't come from me. It was the presence of God. It was His grace. It was the Holy Spirit beginning to dwell again in a place that I myself had abandoned. I realized it wasn't about deserving. It was about accepting. It wasn't about trying hard to be good. It was about surrendering to the only one who is good. And in that surrender, I was healed. Little by little, the wounds of the soul began to heal. Shame began to give way to gratitude. Fear began to be expelled by love. And the guilt, the one that held me back inside, began to fall silent in the face of the forgiveness that I felt flowing inside me. At each step, God showed me that He never wanted to condemn me. He always wanted to restore me. And this restoration was not just spiritual. I started to see myself differently. I started treating others differently. I began to see purpose where before I only saw pain. The addictions that dominated me began to lose ground. The lies I used to hide myself no longer made sense. I didn't want to live in the shadows anymore. I wanted to live in the light. Because when God's light enters, it exposes, yes, but it exposes to heal, exposed to free, exposed to transform. If you are feeling this same thirst for change, comment below, "I want this peace," or write, "God, restore me too." It doesn't matter how long you've been away. It doesn't matter what you've done. What matters is that right now, in this very moment, you are hearing a call. And this call does not come from me. It comes from above. If God did this to me, He can do it to you too. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how far you've gone, how many times you've fallen, how many tears you've shed on the pillow in silence. God's grace is not measured by the number of mistakes we make, but rather by the depth of love He has for each of us. And this love doesn't wear out. It doesn't fail. It doesn't give up. It is a love that crosses dark nights, that enters the silent rooms where pain lives, that reaches those who have lost the strength to ask for help. It was this love that reached me, and it is this love that is reaching you now. I know what it's like to feel dirty inside. I know what it's like to hide for fear of judgment. I know what it's like to carry labels: addict, liar, failure, lost. But what I learned is that God doesn't work with the labels that the world puts on. God sees the heart. And when He looks at you, He doesn't just see what you've done. He sees what you can still be. He sees what no one else sees. See the essence. See the purpose. See the son or daughter who can still be restored, freed, healed. For many years I thought my story was already written, that my end would be marked by failure, by sin, by pain. But God showed me that He specializes in new beginnings, that He takes what was destroyed and makes it be born again, that He turns ashes into life, lament into dance, shame into testimony. If someone had told me back then that one day I would be here telling you this, I would have laughed, because I didn't believe in myself anymore. But God believed, and He believed until the end. Even when I disbelieved in Him, He remained surrounding me, protecting me, waiting for the right moment to show me that His love was still available, that His mercy had not run out. And that's why I'm here today, not to talk about me, but to remind you that God still works miracles. It still frees people from addictions, still heals broken hearts. It still brings back those who walked away. It still rescues stories that seemed lost. And maybe yours is one of those. Maybe you're listening to all this right now and feeling a mixture of pain and hope. This is the Holy Spirit speaking to you, touching areas you may have buried long ago. But God has not forgotten. He saw everything. He knows everything. And yet, He loves you. He wants you back. We live in a time where sin is normalized, but God still frees. He even calls His children back. Society seems to have lost its fear of moving away from God, as if truth was something relative, as if right and wrong depended on the moment, on will, on convenience. Sin became a habit. Immorality became entertainment. Lying has gained space even in the most intimate relationships, and the pain, disguised as fleeting. Pleasure, spread like a silent poison. People are full on the outside but empty on the inside, smiling on social media but crying when no one sees it. And I know exactly what it's like to be in that place. We gradually move away from God without realizing it. A wrong decision here, a concession there, a voice that we choose to ignore. Until when you realize it, you no longer feel anything. The heart hardens, faith weakens, conscience is silent, and the soul begins to scream for help. But even in this dark time, even in this generation that runs from God, He still continues calling. He still whispers amidst the chaos. He still sends signals, uses people, touches hearts, as He may be doing to you now, through this video. Because heaven did not give up on earth, and God has not given up on you. And no matter how much the world tries to convince you that there is no longer right or wrong, God remains holy. He continues to separate light and darkness, and He continues to offer grace to everyone who decides to return, because He is Father. And a father never rejects a son who decides to return. It doesn't matter if you fell, if you got dirty, if you were lost for years. God still opens His arms to welcome you. And He does this not to humiliate you, but to restore you, to clean you up, to dress you again with purpose, with dignity, with identity. You are not what they did to you. You are not what they said about you. You are what God dreamed of when He created you. Sin may be normalized in the world, but in heaven it still hurts. And not because God wants to accuse you, but because He knows how much sin hurts you inside. He knows how much this takes you away from true peace, of true life. And that's why He insists so much. That's why, even after so many attempts by you to remain silent, He still sends messages like this. Because He wants to set you free, free from the inside out. Free your mind, your spirit, your emotions. God still breaks chains. It still renews hearts. It still gives new beginnings. But this only starts when you decide to take the first step. If what you're hearing here is stirring something inside you, comment, "I heard the call," or "I'm coming back, Father." Right, even if your faith is small, even if you are feeling weak, because sometimes all God needs is a whispered yes in the midst of pain to begin a work of transformation. And maybe that yes is waiting to come out of your heart right now. God didn't give up on me, even when I had already given up. And He didn't give up on you. Close your eyes. Let Him touch you now. I'm not talking about religion, doctrine, rules that made you run away from all of this. I'm talking about presence, from an invisible touch that changes everything inside. I felt this touch when I least deserved it, when my life was in pieces, when my soul screamed for help, and my mouth no longer had the strength to pray. I had already given up on myself. I had already accepted that my story was doomed. That addiction would be the end of me. That guilt would be my companion until the last day. But God, He does not accept the final point that the enemy tries to write about us. He rewrites stories. It begins where we only see the end. You may have failed. It may have been lost. You may have done things that no one knows about, and that you may even try to forget. But he knows. He saw everything, and yet he calls you son. Still, he waits for you, not angry, not with contempt, but with mercy, with open arms, with a love that makes no sense to the human mind, but that fills every void in the heart. And maybe now, as you listen to this, your eyes are starting to fill up. Maybe there's something inside that you can't even explain, but you feel it. A pressure in the chest, an urge to cry, a shiver in the soul. This is him. It is not a passing emotion. It is the Holy Spirit visiting you right where you are. It was like that with me. I didn't need a crowd, nor a full temple. It was in my room, alone, broken. And when I stopped resisting, when I dropped the pose that everything was fine, he entered. And when he enters, he not only consoles, he transforms. He picks up the remaining pieces and starts putting everything back together, calmly, with patience, with grace. And when you realize it, it's no longer the same. Not because you forced yourself to change, but because something supernatural started happening inside you. God changes the root. It heals the source of the pain. He touches on the trauma, the fear, the disappointment that took you away from him, and he restores it piece by piece. I'm telling you this because maybe today is your moment. The moment when everything changes. The moment the sky leans over you and says, I love you. I never left you. That touch I felt that morning can reach you now. It doesn't matter if you're listening to it on the bus, at work, in your bedroom, in the bathroom. God doesn't need a stage to operate. He needs a broken, sincere, open heart. And if you have this heart right now, close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and say to him in silence, I am here. Because when the Son positions himself, the Father moves. If this story spoke to you, write, I believe, in the comments. I will pray for you. And now, watch the story of someone who is about to take his own life. This next story you will hear is not just a story of pain, but a silent scream that many live in silence every day. Because just as I was freed, transformed, and restored by God's grace, there are thousands of people today experiencing the same kind of suffering that once destroyed me from the inside. Maybe you are among them. Maybe you're so close to giving up that this video came to you as a last chance. And if so, know, God is seeing you. God brought you here. God still has plans for you. There are battles that we fight inside that no one imagines. You may be smiling on the outside, socializing with people, going to work, scrolling through social media, and still feel like you're falling apart inside. And that's tiring. It gets tiring having to be strong all the time. It's tiring to pretend that everything is fine when, in reality, you don't even know how to hold it together anymore. The pain that haunts you is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It is a void that only God can fill, a war that only heaven can win. And that's why what you're feeling right now, this restlessness in your heart, this tear that insists on falling, this feeling that this video found you at the right moment, this is no coincidence. It's God. It's Him calling you back. I know there are a lot of people watching this video now who have thought about disappearing. Have you ever thought about disappearing forever? You've already believed the lie that the world would be better without your presence. But I need to tell you a truth that perhaps no one has told you yet. You are loved. You are important. You are irreplaceable. And the fact that you are still here, breathing, hearing these words, is proof that God still has something great in store for your life. I know it hurts. I know the past weighs heavily. I know there are days when getting out of bed seems impossible. But there is a name that has the power to reverse diagnoses, break emotional chains, and heal wounds that no one sees. And that name is Jesus. Jesus didn't just come to save the soul after death. He came to restore hearts here, now in the midst of chaos. He came to bring healing, liberation, meaning. He came to reach those that no one else reaches. And if He did this to me, to so many others, He can do it to you too. Sometimes it all starts with one step, one click, a prayer, a video, and maybe your fresh start is happening right now. If you've come this far, it's because God spoke to you in some way. Maybe it was a word, a memory, a tear that you didn't even expect, but something touched you. And if did you feel God's voice in this video? I want to invite you now to subscribe to the channel. This isn't just a video channel. It's a place of reunions, of restoration, of living testimonies that show that God still speaks, still acts, and still transforms lives. And if you want to continue hearing messages that uplift, stories that heal, and words that deeply touch the soul, click the sign up button and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, if you stayed until the end of this video, this says a lot about what God is doing in you. So write here in the comments, God spoke to me until the end. Write with faith. This activates your spiritual response and also helps this message reach others. And if you can, leave your like. This simple gesture causes YouTube to deliver this video to those who are going through the same struggles that you have faced or are still facing. And before leaving, watch the next video that is already appearing on the screen. It has everything to do with what you just heard. It's another real deep story with God's supernatural touch. Go there, click now, and let God continue speaking to you. Because when He starts, He doesn't stop halfway.